and this podcast is one in a series of interviews for the I'm Sweet Enough, the September Sugar-Free Challenge. These talks are a way to introduce notable spokespersons in the anti-sugar crusade. I want to explore with each of them the questions: who are you? What is your message? And what do you hope to achieve in your various ventures? Today, I am interviewing Chef AJ, someone who has devoted her life to helping people to free themselves from the obsession to eat sugar. Chef AJ is my go-to person for the food addiction angle with the people who want to eat vegan or live a plant-based lifestyle. She's the author of The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, a revolutionary approach to conquer cravings, overcome food addiction, and lose weight without going hungry. She has an ultimate weight loss program that she runs virtually. She is the co-host of an annual Better Life Summit, which has multiple speakers, mainly in the plant-based community. And she is host to Chef AJ Live on YouTube, a daily program that is primarily, again, for the plant-based community. Chef AJ, welcome, and I'm thrilled to have you, that I get to interview you this time.
Oh, thank you. But truthfully, my daily show, really, you don't have to be plant-based to enjoy it, because I interview amazing people that aren't necessarily plant-based like you. And for instance, I just interviewed Lalanne, the wife of Jack
Yeah.
LaLanne. So I really try on the show that the tagline on my show is that I want to introduce people to amazing people that are doing good in the world. So they're not necessarily plant-based. So really the show is for everyone, because we do cooking demos. Like, for example, yesterday we had a doctor talking about all kinds of orthopedic issues that can be resolved without surgery. So I think it's a show for everybody. It just happens to be that because I'm plant-based, so many of the speakers that I get are.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's really good. I love the fact that you actually got the wife of Jack LaLanne. Wow, that's pretty good.
Well, she'd be a great interview for you, because she is basically sugar-free. I think it was on her 80th birthday, she finally said to Jack, I think I might have a piece of cake.
God. Okay. Well, if I get her, I'll talk her out of that. Okay. So, Chef AJ, this time it's my turn to ask you questions. Can you, as much as you're willing to tell me, what's your story? And, I saw you I saw the clip from Johnny Carson when you were crazy. So, whatever you're willing to share, let me know. How did you get into the work you're into?
Sure. I actually, as you know, I wrote a whole book with my life story, and I was crazy. And I think I wasn't crazy so much as that I was under the influence of sugar, because for those of us that are sensitive to the refined carbohydrates, sugar and flour, they have a very drug-like effect on us. And so I'm much calmer now. I still have a kind of upbeat and outgoing personality, but compared to when I was drinking Coke Slurpees for breakfast and Dr. Pepper big gulps for lunch, I think I'm a lot saner and a lot calmer being off sugar now, really for, it's getting close to 20 years,
Yeah.
and life is really good. It is, like you say, it is so much sweeter without sugar. And, there's probably people that can have some, like my husband, and not go crazy and not be obese like I was. I was like 80 pounds heavier. But I think for a lot of us, it really is a drug, and it's best avoided.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. A Dr. Pepper Slurpee and a Coke. Oh, yeah, I can relate to that, as I'm sure many of us while listening can. So, how did you get from that place to where you are now? Like, you're a professional in the field. You've been doing this for a long time. Like, what got you into it?
I didn't plan on this. It wasn't like when I was a little kid, I had planned this was going to be my job. Actually, I wanted to be a veterinarian, believe it or not. And I went to the University of Pennsylvania, but instead I became a vegetarian at the age of 17, 43 years ago, because they had me cut up animals, and I just couldn't do it. I was just too sensitive. I did it one time, and it was like, I knew it wasn't for me. So I ended up actually never finishing Penn, going to another college later on. So I think just learning how bad sugar was just, it was mind blowing. And I think the first place that I really heard it from somebody with some medical authority would have been around 2003, when I was 43 years old. I had the beginning of colon cancer. I was obese at the time. I was almost 200 pounds, like 80 pounds less now. And I had developed what they call precancerous polyps in my sigmoid colon. I was actually bleeding. And when I had I had what was called a sigmoidoscopy. They didn't do a colonoscopy, but at the sigmoidoscopy, they discovered these polyps, and they couldn't remove them because my colon was in such a state of ill health. And so they said that I would have to come back and have like a real operation, like with general anesthesia and surgery to get rid of these polyps. And my number one fear in life is anesthesia, and my second is surgery. So that wasn't an option. What happened when I was 19, I was going into the hospital for a very routine same day operation. I became allergic to the anesthetic and woke up with a team of respiratory therapists, resuscitating me. And I was this close to being on a ventilator. I ended up in a hospital for 6 weeks, and I just never got over that experience and that fear. So I said, I'm not doing this. And so I looked for alternative methods of healing. I hadn't heard of the True North Health Center yet, which is a place I've worked for the last 10 years, helping people adopt a health promoting diet. But I had found a place called the Optimum Health Institute in Lemon Grove, California. And I went there really as a detox place to get off sugar, because it's very hard if all you've had was a drug for 43 years, it's very hard to just kind of sit at home and get off this drug by yourself. For alcohol and for other drugs, they have facilities, but except for your place and maybe True North, there's not a lot of places people can go to get off of sugar.
Did you even know about it or find out about it?
It's a funny story. I'm a frugal person, and I had always wanted to go to a spa like Rancho La Puerta, which is kind of high end, and actually end up working there now, teaching there. But I had gotten this magazine of low cost vacations and spas. And I wouldn't exactly say that Optimum Health is a spa. It's a fabulous place. I wouldn't compare it to the Ritz-Carlton, but it was like $875 a week, which is kind of really affordable. And I said, I just need some time to think about this. So I'm just going to go somewhere for a week and just kind of think about what I want to do about this. And then when I got there and I realized it was a healing place where people with really very serious diseases like brain cancer and Lyme's disease and lupus were healing from eating. Now, in that case, it was a raw diet. I don't know if it has to be raw, but it was just a whole diet. It was like there was no processed food. There was no sugar or flour or chocolate or alcohol. There was no animal products as well. They basically were feeding us food, fruits and vegetables. They weren't even doing grains or starches. It was really it was an incredible place. A lot of people went there that were celebrities that were trying to drop weight before the pilot season, or even NFL football players. But a lot of people went there with very serious diseases. And they taught us there that all disease can only exist if you have a state of inflammation in your body. And that even though I was vegan for already 26 years, everything I was eating was junk: flour, sugar, oil, caffeine, so I wasn't actually eating food like fruits and vegetables that had fiber. And it was just mind blowing, because it was just, I can't tell you that. I remember after being off, it was difficult getting off sugar, not forever. The first few days are hard, just like when somebody gets off coffee or when somebody stops any drug. This is why so many people don't stop, is because they can't get through the discomfort of the detox. That's why it's so important, if you can go to a place like Optimum Health or True North or your center, where they're surrounded by, medical professionals that are going to say, look, this is normal. You're going to be okay. This too shall pass, and things like that. And so I don't think I could have gotten off it by myself at home, because if I could have, I would have done it already. But when you're, quote, locked up and paying money, and there is medical supervision, and people telling you, yes, this is normal. I remember there was quite a few days at the beginning where I felt like sick, like almost like a flu in a way, almost like diarrhea and just sweating. I was detoxing. But at the end of it, which I was there from Sunday to Sunday, I remember coming home on the train on Sunday. And at the time I had these 2 big dogs, and I come home and they looked at me like, I don't recognize you. There's something different. Like they didn't jump up or they weren't glad to see me. And even my husband, I was so calm. And I never knew what people talked about, this calm, stable brain that we get when we get off the drug. And to me, the weight loss was a bonus, of course. But if you deal with the addiction, the weight loss does take care of itself. Most people are putting the cart before the horse, and they want to lose weight and then maybe deal with their addiction. Or really, they just really want to lose weight and they want to keep their addiction up to some level, to some degree. But it's amazing. And this, Dr. Tarman, we've never met a person that has gotten off sugar or that lost weight that said, you know what, I was so much happier when I was 100 pounds heavier and addicted. It never happens. The journey, though, is a hard part for a lot of people. But now with people like you and me, there's so much support that it's probably easier than it ever was before.
Yeah. Okay. And so you followed what was essentially a raw diet. So I mean, one of the reasons why I like speaking with you so much is that you follow a food plan that is, plant-based, And just by virtue of that, there's a feeling of feeling virtuous, and people feel like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. This is good for me. But there you were prior to this experience eating garbage, plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Just being vegan is not a guarantee of health or slimness. I was eating a
Exactly.
junk food vegan diet. I wasn't eating food. This is the thing. I
Yeah.
wasn't eating any food. I was eating no fruits, no vegetables. I was basically eating dessert all day long or caffeinated beverages. I mean, when I think back, I don't count my calories or weigh and measure my food, but once in a while I put it in Chronometer just to say, like,
Yeah.
just for fun. And when I think about my past diet, I was getting, like 1,500 of my calories were from liquid in the form of Slurpees and Dr. Peppers. Now that's about how many calories I get today from eating like 6 pounds of whole natural food. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And, back then I remember I just turned 60 this year. And I remember when I was 20, I thought I had a problem with sugar. I felt like that. Like I said, this is like, all I eat is dessert. There's got to be something wrong here. And I
Huh.
remember going to my doctor at the time. I saying, I think I'm, can you like maybe order a glucose tolerance test or something? I think I'm allergic. I mean, it is like an allergy in many ways. I say, I think I'm addicted to sugar. Oh, it's impossible, as he was drinking
Yeah.
his diet soda. Well, it's not impossible. It's just
No.
not as well known. I mean, that's what I love, that you're a medical doctor, because you're telling people this is real. Before it was just us people who were think, oh, they're crazy. You can't
Yeah.
be addicted to food. And you really can't be addicted to food.
Huh.
It's sugar and flour and
Yeah.
alcohol. It's
Yeah.
processed, refined carbohydrates. It's not
True.
complex carbohydrates. People aren't going to Butternut Squash Anonymous. I don't see people, having that problem, or Arugula Anonymous. It's
Yeah.
the refined carbohydrates, sugar, flour, alcohol, that in their
Exactly.
whole state probably wouldn't have been a problem for most people, but it's the refining that makes us nuts.
Yeah. And so I guess it was around 20 years ago that you discovered that transition, and then you went from being the nuts that you'll see. You guys have to watch that Johnny Carson piece. The nuts that you'll see there, which was very humorous, to the person that you are now, which is very vivacious but not nuts, very
Right.
clear-headed.
I
So
was crazy. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And it started early, and I don't think my mother intentionally said, I'm going to addict this kid to sugar. I think that our parents really didn't know,
Yeah.
it's like, especially, the processed food industry really didn't become an empire till like after World War II.
Yes.
And when I've read books like The End of Overeating by Dr. David Kessler, or Salt,
Yes.
Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us by Michael Moss, my understanding is that, yes, they knew they had an addictive product, just like the tobacco industry knew they had an addictive
Yes.
product. But I don't think they anticipated that some Americans were going to use these processed foods as their sole food source. So what my understanding was is they created like Swanson's TV dinner for Wednesday nights when mom had a PTA meeting and she could feed the husband and Junior, or the frozen waffles out of the day that, mom went hiking with her friends. But what's happened is many people eat processed food as their sole food source. They're not eating any real food, right? So
Yeah, that's right. And that, I think that has just gotten progressively more and more the case, especially in the last 5 or 10 years. And so, I mean, you're very generous to the food industry by saying that it wasn't necessarily intentional that people only eat processed food.
I just don't want to get sued. I don't know if it was intentional, because the cigarette industries, the tobacco industries, they bought the processed food industries. So
no. So I'm just thinking that that's probably changed, so that might well be the case now. But let's not speculate.
Yeah.
We can have our own thoughts about it.
Absolutely. Well, maybe a class action lawsuit against, against them for creating a product they knew to be addictive. The problem is that apparently there are some people for whom it's not addictive. And that's the same thing with alcohol. There's people that can drink alcohol even in small amounts or even larger amounts that don't actually become alcoholic. And there's people that can eat processed food and not feel the pull like some of us do, can eat it occasionally, maybe don't get a lifestyle disease or overweight. So for some people,
Moderation is possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. But people don't understand when they're addicts that it's not possible. And this is what everybody's seeking. They're seeking a way to continue their drug, but not have it affect them. And that's just, to me, that can make you just as crazy as the sugar.
Exactly. And I thank you for bringing that up, because there are people who can moderate and who can figure out the magic line of how much they can have and how much they can't. But there are a large number of us who simply cannot. And I fit into that category, as do you.
Yeah.
And, the numbers there, we don't have actual numbers, but the speculation is anywhere from 10% on the very cautious side to up to 40%, especially in the obese population, of which 2/3 of our population, Canadian and American, are now. So
Absolutely.
we're looking at numbers that are growing and growing and growing. And my impression is that, if you are living in an environment and smoking every day, you may not have been a smoker when you started, but you become addicted to smoking after enough exposure to it. And the exposure that we have today is different than I even had 10 years ago. So I think it's that golden grail of moderation is going to become less and less possible, even amongst the non-sugar addicted.
Yeah. And what I want to say about processed food, and again, I wrote a book 10 years ago called Unprocessed, and I dedicated it to Jack Lalanne, who said, if God made it, eat it. If man made it, don't eat it. Even if processed food isn't addictive in the way that we believe it is, it's really not food. It's not healthy food. It's not, it's not a whole food. And so I don't think that anyone needs to eat it, especially children, especially those that are trying to reverse a chronic lifestyle disease. So it's so prevalent because it's readily available, easily affordable, socially acceptable. It's cheap. They get subsidized. You don't see any money going to the kale industry, right? You don't see any television. You ever see an ad on television for kale? I haven't, but you see it for, Cocoa Puffs all the time. So I do think, they can sue me if they want. They're evil and they knew what they were doing. I was trying to be nice to them, but they aren't being very nice to us. It's just people.
I'm waiting for funding. I haven't received it.
It's just that, right now we're not volunteering anywhere because of the pandemic, but I've always volunteered at a hospital with my dog Bailey, and I look at the food in the hospital. Oh my God. And I'm not even talking about the food that they feed the patients. I'm talking about the food that you see in the cafeteria that they're feeding the guests and the employees. And it's pretty much all processed food. It's not food.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was so naive when I was an intern, working late nights, and that was the food that I had given to me or available to me. I remember thinking, it doesn't look healthy, but it's in a hospital, so it must be somehow. And I gained so much weight in that internship year because it's not true. Okay, so Chef Ada, you mentioned your book Unprocessed. So from that time 20 years ago when you went in this program and discovered a change, how did you get into working with people? And then into writing?
Yeah, it was not, like I said, it wasn't what I had expected for my life trajectory. So what happened is in 2003, when I went to the Optimum Health Institute to heal my precancerous polyps, which I did, by the way, because within 6 months of eating a whole food plant-based diet, and in that case, it was raw. So it was basically fruits and vegetables, and there were some seeds in it. And then I had the repeat sigmoidoscopy. I was completely healed. I could not keep that strict of a diet up. It just didn't honestly taste very good. When you're sick, you can do things, you're a little bit more motivated, but it was just, I was cold all the time eating raw food. And it was just, I guess, it had to taste a little bit better once I got better. And so I enrolled in culinary school. Not because I was trying to be a chef, but because I knew I wanted to eat healthier, but I wanted it to taste a little bit better than what I had been eating in my healing diet. And so then when I got out of culinary school, I was making a lot more money being an activity director at a retirement home. And I took basically an 80% pay cut to work at a restaurant because I wanted that experience. And it just kind of evolved because I found that I had a passion, not so much for cooking, but for teaching people how to do things. And it just kind of evolved, and people just
you really are a chef then. Chef.
I am a real chef. I do. And I can make compliant food within, my food plan, which, by the way, what I want people to understand is whether you're vegan or not, in my opinion, if you have food addictions, you have to be abstinent. And this is the thing that nobody wants to hear. They don't want to hear that they have to forever not have sugar and flour, or because they think they can never have dessert. You can. It just can't be made out of sugar and flour if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you went into the chef business and started making abstinent type meals, or
so at first they weren't abstinent to the degree that we believe it needs to be. But see, I didn't know you 17 years ago. I didn't know any of this. I didn't even know that there was a thing called food addiction. And so what I did, and again, people are going to be different how they do this. I think if you can rip the Band-Aid off, That's the best way. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people
I
like to dip
know.
their toe in. And
Yes.
so I went from
It's a big
43 years of
actually.
basically eating the all dessert diet, candies, cakes, cookies, pies, ice cream, my 5 food groups. So yes, I was starting to incorporate more fruits and vegetables. So
Yeah.
I was eating lots of big salads. I was eating smoothies made out of fruits and greens. And so that was really good. But I wasn't yet ready to dessert. So believe it or not, I became a pastry chef. Not the best idea from somebody with food addictions, but what I was able to do was create what I call interim desserts for people that are not ready to just quit, made out of dates. Now, I know that for many food addicts,
Yeah.
that's not going to work. But at the time, it was
was
better than, because I'm not going to do the fake sugars. I think they're way worse for food addiction, and they're nasty and they're disgusting. But so I learned how to create really, whole food desserts out of things like whole grains and dates. And this was my methadone. And now if I wouldn't eat them today, not even because I'm afraid of being triggered, they're just too ridiculously sweet. Dates are so sweet, So that was my course of action. That's what I did, which is good because I wrote another book that's based on that, because there are some people that are never going to stop eating desserts. If that's the case, I would rather have them eat a dessert made out of walnuts and dates than a dessert made out of flour and sugar. I'd rather have people eat food than not eat food.
And that was the book Processed?
Well, this is a book that actually hasn't come out yet but this is one called A Date with Dessert.
Oh my
so
God.
So I don't recommend it for people trying to lose weight. I don't eat those desserts, so don't worry.
But it's a food plan that would be not sugar, but I guess a lot of fructose.
It's a lot of fruit. So some people will do well with it because the idea is, it's just also because I am an ethical vegan. And when people that are not food addicts eat dessert, they're not eating dessert because they like the taste of the egg. The egg is used as a riser. So I was able to figure out how to make exactly what people are used to, not only vegan, but just using primarily dates and sometimes other fruits, sometimes just apples, things like that. I don't always have to use dates, but I am using things like bananas, which I know for some people, it's not going to work. And it doesn't work for me. Like I said, not because it triggers me. It's just that stuff. It's just, I'm interested more in food now. It's funny how for 43 years, all I wanted was sweet. And now I would rather have savory. I would rather eat roasted Brussels sprouts. I would rather eat sweet potatoes and broccoli, because it's not that I never have, what people would call a treat, but it's, especially in summer, I love watermelon and cherries, but I'd rather eat food now.
Yeah. Okay. So you started to design plans, and then you started writing your books, and then I guess at some point you developed this ultimate weight loss program.
So what happened was, I used to live in Los Angeles up till about 2 years ago. And starting in about 2012, I used to run programs in my apartment in Sherman Oaks, and I can only fit about 24 people in. I do these about 4 times a week, where they would come to my home 4 weeks in a row on a Saturday night from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And they would have a workout class, like a yoga class. I'd give them a lecture, or I'd Skype one of the doctors in that I work with, and then they'd have a meal, and then we would do sharing. And people were having great success at being abstinent and losing weight. And so people would be posting their selves in bikinis on Facebook, and people were like, what is this? What is this? So we found a way to do the program online starting in 2014. And that's how that happened. So
that's it sounds like it's essentially an outpatient program.
In a way, yes, I would say that. And so what we find, and as you find with your group, is people like the support of other people that are going down the same path. They may not be at the same step on the journey, but that's what it's so nice when you see people that have already got to the top of the mountain to tell you, yes, let me help you up. You're going to be fine. This is normal. And the thing is I don't know if there is a top of the mountain, but I want people to know that you're always going to slide a little bit down, even when you're going to the top. That's just the way it is with an addiction. It's not like, oh, I heard Dr. Tarman speak, and so tomorrow everything's no, there's a process of going unprocessed, especially because, one of my mentors is Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and he wrote a book called The Pleasure Trap, which if you haven't read, I think you'd really like. And he says that we live in a world designed to make us fat, sick, and miserable. And that is true because, we didn't have this problem in the Stone Age. I know a guy from Ethiopia, they don't have this problem, because they actually eat food. Processed food is too expensive in his country. And he almost rolls his eyes. It's like, I don't get it. Like, why don't you people just eat food like we do?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So then that is something you started to do. And is that sort of the gist of what you do? Is that?
Well, I have my fingers in a lot of pies. I like to do different things. So I love to write books. And of course I do run some groups, and I even do a little bit of private coaching, not too much, but I also teach. One of the things that I started doing in these past 2 years that I really love is teaching business classes with my husband, helping people that want to self-publish books and get more well-known. They don't have to be in the plant-based world, but most of our clients are, because to me, that's exciting, because I need somebody to pass the torch to. So I really, I find it easier to coach people on business than on addiction, because they generally don't make as many excuses when they're trying to be successful in business as they do when they're trying to lose weight or overcome, you've heard it all, it's just.
This work is full of people with lots of excuses, because addiction is just so hard to, that fear of going over that hump, even though that hump isn't that long, it's only a week, or you had the experience of a week.
Yeah, it was probably I think only 3 days were miserable, to be honest, if I remember correctly. It wasn't even the whole week.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say, so you have your fingers in a lot of pies, and so the other thing I would want to say is that your Better Life Summit, you've been doing that now for a number of years.
Yeah, that's really, I would say if I had to pick like one main job, that would be it. So I love my work with Toby. You've been a guest. And again, even though I'm plant-based, regular people or people that aren't plant-based can benefit from our summits, because we have experts on like you. And I'm doing one actually this year that has nothing to do with veganism. It's on GI health, because that's another passion of mine, because I'm somebody that had severe GI disease my whole life.
Right.
And so that's something that interests me. I love interviewing doctors and people that are smarter than me. And the summits are just a wonderful way to get free information out to people. And that has been a really wonderful. And we're having another one coming up, and guess who I'm going to ask to be another expert, of course.
Great. Chef AJ, just because I have a lot of people, and you mentioned this a couple times, the bowel issue. Would you say that that eating real food, regardless of, just basically unprocessed food, was a significant contributor to your gut health?
Absolutely. Oh my God. I think I've interviewed 30 GI doctors now, and they all say that sugar is just not a friend to our microbiome. But believe it or not, all those fake ones like stevia and erythritol, they're actually worse. They are a nightmare for our gut microbiome. And so we have to start eating real food. And, as much as I would prefer people not eat animal products, it's in many ways, it's better than eating processed food, because our ancestors did eat some animal products, not the way today where they're factory farmed and force-fed antibiotics and hormones, that kind of thing. But at least our system recognizes that. But what most people are eating, and I'm not very popular with the vegans, I'll tell you that, because when you go to the veg fests, you can't even get a fruit or vegetable. It's all, vegan donuts, vegan ice cream, vegan cheese. And I understand that it is better for the animals, but it's not really any better for human health than processed food
This is why I love speaking with you, because I think that's such an important piece. And that's where we both sit on the very same page. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do. So I think so many people agree that we're not supposed to be eating processed food, but the vegans are really holdouts, because they say, well, they're transitional. People don't transition. They're just as addictive. All that fake vegan food with the sugar and the oil and the salt is as addictive as the non-vegan counterpart, especially if one is sensitive. It's calorically dense. It's not very nutritionally, full of nutrients the way whole foods are. But I'm like a minority within a minority. The people that actually eat a truly whole food plant-based diet. We're just a tiny blip on the radar.
Yeah, and probably the smaller portion are the raw foodists, and they're like, they're considered quite extreme.
Yeah, but they're not eating anything processed. That's for sure.
Exactly. So I think maybe you've answered the next question. If I say what is unique to your message, I would say that to me that's one of the unique messages is this piece about even within the plant-based community. It's a minority to speak about the unprocessed foods. But do you have anything else you want to add in terms of what's unique about Chef AJ?
Well, I think, okay, so I would say I'm your go-to person if you want to manage food addictions and lose weight, but do it in a plant-based way. So when I first discovered there was a thing called food addiction, I didn't know you at the time. I went to one of the experts, and that I'm not going to say who it is. It's a lovely person, but that person said, oh, well, you have to eat dairy and you have to eat animal products and you have to weigh and measure your food. Now that might work for some people, but I knew it wasn't going to work for me. And so what I tried to do is bridge the gap between all the wonderful things you teach about an abstinent food plan and why it's so important if you have an addiction to be abstinent, with what I've learned from all the wonderful plant-based diets about the health benefits of a vegan diet, and with an approach called calorie density, where we don't have to, it's work based on Barbara Rolls. And so that's kind of what I do, is I've got my foot in the food addiction world and in the plant-based world, and I kind of try to marry them together for people that want that approach. And my message has been for the last 20 years is, look, whether you're vegan or not, nobody needs to eat processed food. Processed food isn't healthy for children or other living things. It's not food. And that is one thing that everyone agrees on. Even people that eat it, they know it's not food. It's tasty and it's cheap, but it's not food. Food is not supposed to come in a can, a box, a bottle, or a bag. It's supposed to come from a plant. And, you know, if you could do a surprise inspection of my home at any time, and I think the worst thing I have is maybe some plant milk in a box. Everything else, it's just food. You know, food is supposed to go bad. It's not supposed to be there like in years. I have this cinnamon roll that I have that's like 20 years old. It hasn't changed. It was used as like a teaching tool. It's like one of the ones from 7-Eleven. It looks exactly the same as it did 20 years ago. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, let me just ask, you said something and I want to ask you, plant-based milk, you mean like coconut milk? And
yeah, it's basically oat milk. It has 2 ingredients, oats and water. But what I'm trying to say is that's the most processed thing in my house right now.
What do you think about things like coconut milk and almond milk? And
So my feeling is I don't like, well, again, most of the people I'm working with want to lose weight. Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of liquid calories. I'm just not. And I think we're supposed to drink water and maybe some herbal tea. But if you need a splash of it, like because you're drinking some herbal tea or maybe to put in like your oatmeal, it's fine. I'm not for people just drinking boxes and boxes of plant milk as a substitute, or milkshakes or smoothies or that. But we do use it. Sometimes we'll make like a butternut bisque and it calls for a cup of non-dairy milk. So that's how I'm using it, you know, as a condiment, not as a beverage.
Right. Now, you mentioned a couple of times your work. So are you available as an actual chef, like for somebody who wants to do what you're
well, you know, if the price is right, maybe. But for the most part, I don't really chef for people. I would rather, like, this is what I did in LA, is it's like if a celebrity called, I wouldn't teach the celebrity. They would send me whoever their person was, whether it was their assistant and I would teach them how to do it rather than me having to repeat it over and over.
Right,
you know?
right. Okay. So you're not somebody who like will do a private coaching session or something.
No, I do privates. I just don't think I'm the right person to be ongoing. You know what I mean? Like I'll talk to anybody at least once, because a lot of times once I talk to them, I know where to refer them. That's one thing that I'm pretty good at, saying, you know, I really think you need this or need that. Sure, I talk to people all the time, but you know, it's the same price to join my program for a year as it is to talk to me for an hour. So I try to have people do that option, because then they also get the group support. And I think that peer support is important, because I think that when people see me now, they're not seeing the 200-pound person that was on Johnny Carson. And then I could be unrelatable. Like people like, what do you know? You're a skinny bitch. And it's like, well, I may look like that now, but you don't know how much I suffered for 52 years being obese. So I think that's why it's important to be in a group, because that you have the peer support. It's important.
Okay, just a couple more questions. What would you say is your major obstacle that you're navigating?
Me?
Yeah. Professionally.
Gosh, professionally. You know, I would say that it's tough to get people to believe that this is real sometimes, you know what I mean? And some doctors too. I mean, because some doctors are still poo-pooing it, as you know, and not you and not the ones that I interview, but they're like, you know, they either roll their eyes, well, we don't really know, because it's sort of like I don't drink alcohol by choice. I've tasted alcohol. Like in my 20s, when I was scrapped for money, they would do this market research in college, and like you'd get like $100 to give your opinion. I remember doing this thing on vodka, and I thought, God, this is disgusting. But it's like it didn't light me up. Like I wanted to keep drinking vodka. You know, I basically wanted to throw up. It was nasty. So I don't think that I would be an alcoholic. But even so, I think I probably could drink alcohol if I wanted to. But even if I could, I would not go to my friend, who I have a friend who's a recovering alcoholic, alcoholic and say, what is the matter with you? I can have a drink and stop. Why can't you have one drink and just push yourself away from the bar? I wouldn't do that. And I think most people wouldn't do that. But when it comes to food, and this is why it's so sad, because most of the people in my group are women whose husbands are like this, and they don't have this problem. It's like, well, you know, why can't you control yourself? And I think the insensitivity of people without the disease is the biggest obstacle, because it's very hard to work with people, because then they can't control their environment, because there's going to be crap in it all the time, because the kids and the husband, well, they're not overweight. And they say, and so they, then what happens is you add shame to it. See, they don't look at it as, see, if I have asthma. Yeah. And I don't beat myself up like, oh my God, why can't I breathe in a smoky casino? What is wrong with me? Everyone else can breathe, but when I go to a smoky casino, I have to take medicine. I don't do that. I don't think any asthmatic does. I don't think diabetics do that. But with this disease, because it is not yet approved or understood by the individual's family and doctor, they feel a lot of shame, because it looks like everybody else gets away with it. But you know what? Just because somebody is not overweight doesn't mean they're getting away with it. There are, listen, I spent, like you used to work at a retirement home or a nursing home. So did I, up until I was 43. There were plenty of thin people in there having strokes. So just because somebody looks visually thin from eating crap does not mean they're healthy, number one. So I think the biggest obstacle is that it is not accepted yet, because not everybody has it, you know. I think that's the biggest obstacle that all of us are up against right now.
Yeah. Okay, good. And so last question then, Chef AJ, what is your newest project? What can we expect from you in the next few years?
Well, okay. So September 10th, I have a book coming out with my co-writer, Glenn Merzer, who helped me with my first two books. And this is really his book. I contributed the recipes, but they're all, you know, abstinent. Well, at least for my food plan, abstinent compliant, meaning no sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, no gluten. And it's called Own Your Health. And there's about 110 recipes, 75 original ones from me. So that's my next venture. So yeah, it'd be fun.
Oh, great. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, sure. Chef AJ, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the time of day to talk about you and your story. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. Because I'm so glad I met you, because you're just such a voice of sanity. And the fact that you are like the one, at least the only medical doctor I know that's giving this a voice. So I really appreciate your work. And I'm so glad we have opportunities to work together and support each other.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bye.